everyone, and welcome back to twitch.tv/AWS. I'm Abby. I'm here with Nick and Nathan. Nick is the PM for AWS AppMesh and Amazon ECS. Nathan is the PM for Amazon EKS.
Yeah.
Hi.
Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Thanks for joining me, I guess. It's the royal we. It's me and my dearly departed Applebox. I know that between the three of us, we've had quite a few containers launches the last couple hours. Do you want to maybe go first and tell us about? We had two containers launches this morning outside of AppMesh, which is not for just container.
Yeah, so there's two things to talk about. One is with ECS, and then by definition with Fargate as well. So we're actually giving customers the ability to explicitly define deployments in their service definitions on ECS. So what that means is that you can actually have multiple versions of what we call task sets defined in the same service. And each task set can have, for example, its own container images. So that allows you to create a new version of a service. But unlike today, where you create the new version of the service and you update it and the old version is gone, and then the deployment kind of happens behind the scenes without you having any visibility or control, now you can actually have explicit visibility and control over the different versions of your service that are available. You can create a new task set, start deploying that, but keep the old task sets running if you choose.
We're basically making a little bit more explicit functionality that we were using internally to do things like AppMesh. We're letting you use it.
And in fact, even ECS itself has had this capability. It's just that we didn't expose it to customers, but that's actually how deployments work behind the scenes when you deploy a new version of a service in ECS or Fargate.
I believe there was another one. It was ECS local container endpoints. About the local testing experience for ECS and Fargate. I just dropped a GitHub link in the Twitch chat. Can you tell us a little bit about local endpoints?
Yeah, and I just want to say a few words about kind of the big picture of what we're doing there before specifically saying what that is. So we recognize that developers like to iterate quickly, especially when you're working with containers. You like to be able to build containers and try them out on your local machine before deploying them into the cloud. And with ECS today, that can be a little bit challenging because you can't actually run ECS without running it in the cloud. And so there are certain dependencies in that process. In particular, there's ECS metadata and the EC2 credentials endpoints that some applications actually have they make use of those endpoints. And what this new image that you just published the link for on GitHub allows you to do is run a container locally that effectively simulates those endpoints so that you can run a container and have it make use of the ECS metadata or EC2 instance credentials endpoints locally without having to run that container in the cloud. And the idea is that accelerates the development process.
And that is part of what is intended to be a larger project. So this was kind of step one, and step two was how can we give you access to those two specific endpoints. Those were things that we had heard were big sticking points for people.
Right.
But it's on GitHub, it's open source. There's a couple of really nice blogs about it. One of the SDs that works in that team wrote the compute blog post on a couple different scenarios that you could test with this. We put a link in the Twitch chat, but it's intended to be a bigger project. So we'll keep finding more parts of kind of what I would consider the production experience, and then finding ways for you to mock that locally so that you can make sure that things are working before you go to production.
Exactly.
Changing scenes for a little bit. Nate, do you want to talk to us about what's going on with EKS today?
Yeah, we have a lot that's been going on with EKS all week, actually, and we're not done. So earlier this week, we were really excited to open source 2 new CSI drivers for Amazon EKS and also Kubernetes workloads running anywhere. So the first is the Amazon EFS, Elastic File System, CSI driver. Lets you use EFS with your Kubernetes cluster. And the second is the CSI driver for FSX for Lustre. This is a really powerful storage service that's used for machine learning applications. Both of those projects are on GitHub. We're in the process of donating them to the Kubernetes project. And what's really cool about those is those work for Kubernetes on AWS, and they also work with EKS. And those are alpha. And another CSI driver that we've had out there for a little while, the EBS CSI driver for using Elastic Block Store with your Kubernetes cluster, we actually graduated to a Kubernetes beta. So now we recommend and support that for production use cases and production workloads on any Kubernetes cluster, including with Amazon EKS. Today, we're really excited to have a lot of stuff coming out. Most relevant to AppMesh, we've now open sourced the EKS AppMesh controller for Kubernetes. So what this is a Kubernetes controller that works natively with Kubernetes to make it really easy to connect your cluster up to AppMesh. And this is a great integration point that lets us extend and take advantage of all the great AWS functionality that comes along with the AppMesh launch today. And I think we're going to put the link for that project on GitHub into the Twitch chat here.
Yes.
And then the final thing that we've had today is support for Windows workloads on Amazon EKS. So on the containers roadmap, we now have a project, and we're supporting you to run Windows containers and Windows nodes with your Amazon EKS clusters, and that's in a preview. So we're running that as a preview. We're really excited to get customer feedback, to see customers how they're going to use that, what kind of workloads they're going to be moving to EKS with these Windows containers and Windows nodes. And check out our GitHub roadmap page where we have information on how to get started with that preview, and also leave us feedback about any ways that we can make that better, or any bugs or anything that you find.
I think high level, right? I think between these announcements, we've touched on a couple of what I would consider themes across the containers org this year,
yeah.
Right? So it's open sourcing more. So where we can, let's open source from the beginning. Having more transparency with our customers, so letting them see things on stuff like the public roadmap. So AppMesh went GA today with the public roadmap instead of adding one after the fact. And then you also see us working on trying to get more feedback from customers earlier in the product design process. So we started with the roadmap. We're now doing developer previews. We've run a couple of them before. I think we've really formalized it with the EKS Windows preview. So we'll tag issues on the roadmap when they're in developer preview. And then for AppMesh, we're running something called a beta channel. So you're familiar with many services in AWS have an initial preview. It might be public, it might be private, but some subset of people will test out a feature or a service before it goes GA. For AppMesh, we're making that a little bit bigger. So Nick maybe wants to tell us about the beta channel for AppMesh.
Yeah, so the beta channel, the idea is, not only do we want to be transparent about our roadmap and tell people what's coming, but we want to give them the chance to actually try out those new beta features before they go into production. So they get access to them quite a bit sooner than they would otherwise. And they have the opportunity also to give feedback during that period and potentially actually shape the future direction depending on the feedback that we receive. We're still working out some of the details on exactly how that's going to work, but the big picture is that you'll be able to use this. You don't have to go get whitelisted. You don't have to sign some special agreement. It's a public set of endpoints, public APIs that you can use. And it'll be based on the production GA AppMesh, but it'll have additional features that are not available in the production GA AppMesh.
I think important there, right, is that so both the developer preview and the beta channel, it means that your feedback is getting in. Instead of filing something after the fact and saying, hey, I wish you had done it this way, we're saying, here's this a little bit early, play with it and let us know if we're going in the right direction. It's something that we've done, I think, a lot for EKS this year, is we've started posting design docs. So before we've even built something, where we're just kind of in we're thinking about this phase. Actually, a cool one for ECS was container ordering. But before we had built anything, we put this out and we said, hey, does this actually solve the problem that you're looking for, right? Because I think that you can build the coolest thing in the world, but if it doesn't solve any of your customers' problems, it's probably not going to help you out a whole lot.
And we'll still do that on AppMesh too. We're going to have things that show up on our roadmap before they're in the beta channel, and you'll have the opportunity to give feedback before it becomes available in the beta channel. I think a lot of times, there's a difference between theory and reality, and you may not understand it fully until you actually try it out. and trying it out, then you have the opportunity to give really substantive feedback
Yeah.
on how it actually works, not on how you think it might work based on reading something, right? I think that's really important. And I'm really excited that we get to do this.
I am too. I think the people that are actually using these in production are ultimately, those are the most important voices, right? We can build things that we think are cool. We can build things that we think will work for you, but you guys are the ones that are running them, so it should be, I think customer feedback drives roadmap everywhere at AWS, but I think right now we're trying to make the loop just a little bit closer.
Absolutely. I think that, especially working on projects like Kubernetes, where everything is open source, for us to bring as much of that transparency and as much of the ability to have that direct communication with our customers and deciding what features are we building for EKS, what use cases are we unlocking with Kubernetes on AWS, and having that direct line of communication, that's critical for us. It's so important to how we think about the service and how we build for the service. So we're really excited to get that feedback on GitHub and to engage with customers there about what they think that we can do next and what we can do better.
So containers-wise, so we covered a couple of the specific announcements, and we covered a little bit about what, so Santa Clara and the roadmap and the beta channels and the developer preview. Do we want to speak at all to what we think is kind of coming up next, or things we're thinking about, themes we're thinking about, anything that we think is kind of extra important to cover?
Well, I think we've talked about this some when talking about AppMesh, but I think you're going to see more of this across container services in general, is that theme of application first.
Yeah.
How can we make it easier for our customers to spend their effort thinking about their applications and less time thinking about the common heavy lifting that they have to do with containers, right? And I think, I know that we're spending a lot of time thinking about our future roadmap in the context of that kind of thinking. And that's true across all of container services and also in AppMesh as well.
Yeah, I think on the EKS and on the Kubernetes side, for us, it's about enabling those customer migrations to the cloud. It's about continuing to deliver and unlock features and functionality that give our customers more advantage and more capabilities in terms of how they run their workloads. So some of the things that we're working on is the ability to have control plane logging to consume the audit and authenticator and API server logs off of the EKS control plane, so that you can monitor the control plane better and you can see how are your workloads performing, how is your cluster performing. If you're running a lot of clusters, you can roll up the audit logs across your entire organization and have that next level of operational support for production grade workloads. Working on things like logging, working on new regions that we have in the pipeline that are on our roadmap, new versions of Kubernetes, supporting new versions of Kubernetes as they come out, giving customers access to the features and functionality they need as they move their workloads from on-premises to the cloud, and they're using Kubernetes to do that. That's one of our biggest focuses right now, and it's something we're going to continue to do, and we're really excited to keep listening to people and do that in the best way we can.
I think something else that I forgot to call it a little bit earlier is that trying to offer a little bit more guidance also. So I think there's two kind of choices there, right? There's giving developers the flexibility to build the way that they want to, but also giving you a little bit of help if you're not really sure. So we had that ECS local blog post that Wesley wrote from the SDE from the local endpoints team. Has a lot of scenarios, times that you might want to use this, the benefit that you're getting out of it. AppMesh has the examples repo, so there's a whole folder in there of examples, so that if you're not quite sure how to get started, especially with some of these things that I think are newer concepts, right? So service meshes in general are pretty new. So trying to give a little bit more examples, a little bit more guidance, help you out a little bit, not just with the here's what we released and here's what it can do for you, but why did we do it? Right. Why did we build it the way that we did? I think we've also started trying to put a little bit more focus on talks and blog posts that are giving you the context behind it. So Werner wrote that really great post on his site about AppMesh that also came out today.
Yep.
That was a little bit forward thinking too. So not just what can you do right now, but where do we see this going in the future? And I think that kind of stuff is really useful for customers because you can see how it's going to grow with you instead of just here's what I could use it for right now.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, I think across the containers org, the way that we run services and capabilities at AWS, it's not a point in time, it's an evolution, and I think that when we launch these services, and not to speak too much for AppMesh, but this is the starting line, right? This is
absolutely.
where the journey begins, and I think that's what's been so exciting with EKS, having EKS be in preview and then generally available since last June, is watching the capabilities that have been added to the service. We went from 2 regions to 13 regions in under 9 months, and the idea that we're going to grow with customers is absolutely a tenet in what we're doing.
Yeah, and I think that's really an important point that we grow with our customers.
Yeah.
And that something like AppMesh or our various container services that we have, it's this two-way flow where we're getting feedback from customers as their needs are evolving, and then we're evolving our products. We don't set out and have some 24-month roadmap that was developed in a clean room with no input from customers. I mean, the whole thing is continuously evolving as the customer's needs evolve. I'm really excited to see what's going to happen with AppMesh over the next year, 18 months.
me too. I think speaking of roadmaps, right? Those issues come from all of you guys. So if you have something for EKS or for open source at AWS or ECS or ECR or Fargate or AppMesh, those roadmaps are all public. That's how we figure out what you guys want us to build. That's how we help prioritize things. That's how we know not just what you guys want us to build, but how do you want to see it implemented? What use case is it actually solving? Tons of issues there with people asking, making suggestions, or talking to each other. And you can also see, in some cases, I like when people write in, and then it turns out that it's already possible.
Yeah.
And maybe they were calling it a different thing than we were calling it. So that's always really cool too. But if you want something, if you're looking for something, if you have a question, definitely do not hesitate to open a roadmap on the issues.
Yeah, and there's a good chance it'll be one of the 3 of us who responds to you.
Yes, actually, one of my favorite things, right, is that I was an AWS customer before I joined a couple years ago. And I'm not sure I ever would have before known, I was at a really small startup, and I'm not sure how I ever would have known how to talk to an SDE. I wouldn't have known how to get in contact with anyone, and I think that my favorite part about the roadmap is that it's full of the service team. Marketing is there, PMM is there, but it's also, there are SDEs hanging out there, there are product managers, I am there. So it's really a good way too to talk directly with the people that are building the services.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Cool.
Did I miss anything for EKS? I know that you guys have been launching things this week.
Yeah, I think I mentioned a few that we're working on, which is control plane logging, support for the latest Kubernetes versions. Some of the things that are a little farther out for us is something we've talked about a lot, which is the ability to use Fargate with EKS. That's definitely been on our roadmap and is still very much something that we're working on bringing to customers. Overall, I think we're seeing a lot of people move to EKS and move to Kubernetes, and our goal is to just make that a lot easier, make that journey easier, better integrations with AWS services like AppMesh, and really make the move to the cloud and the move to Kubernetes on AWS super simple and super straightforward.
Awesome. It looks like we are just about out of time, so we are going to wrap this session up. Nick, Nate, thank you for joining me. We will be back in just a couple of minutes here on twitch.tv/AWS. It will be another container session. This time we're talking about deep learning containers with the machine learning team. So stay tuned. We will be right back.